It gives me great pleasure for this episode of What the Lux to welcome Celine Assimon, who, as of Friday, was the CEO of De Beers Jewelers, but is no longer. But that aside, has held many incredible positions in the world of luxury that we're going to dive into over the course of this podcast. Celine, you've had such an impressive career, really, really impressive, and you've managed to do it while raising family, and you've done it not just in one country, but two. I probably got that wrong, and it's probably 3 or 4, but
a good number of countries.
A good number of countries.
I'm a nomad.
A nomad. Can you just, for the benefit of the listeners, just talk us through your career journey, because it's been pretty remarkable.
Oh wow! So I went to business school, like many, many leaders in the luxury industry, and being brought up far away from Paris. And feeling a bit like an outsider, I guess, because, most luxury brands are based in France, are based in Paris. I decided to try to make it in the States. Packed a suitcase, was lucky to find an internship in New York City, moved there and stayed there for on and off 15 years in really learning and growing and seizing as many opportunities as possible in the US. And it's easier to do that in America than it is in Europe, where you're expected to follow certain rules and a certain framework for your career. And while things have changed today, it was really the case 25 years ago. You were expected to be promoted every 2 years within the same organization, etc. It's much more fluid in the States. So I started working at Richemont for different brands, from Cartier to Piaget, Panerai. Then was lucky enough to join LVMH, Louis Vuitton, where I moved from a regional role running watches and jewelry in the Americas to driving the commercial expansion of the offer globally out of Paris. Then I rejoined Richemont in Switzerland. So I moved to Geneva with my daughter, joined Piaget, a team that I loved, and a brand that I still love. Really passionate about this beautiful brand. And then was offered my first CEO role in Switzerland for a brand called Degues, which was a pretty bold move for me. It was my first CEO role in an independent brand that was looking to change investors, bring in new investors, total reinvention of a portfolio. And I'm sure we'd talk about that later. Had to take the brand through bankruptcy. I still have my battle scars, but, great learning experience. And then 4.5 years ago, moved to London to run De Beers Jewelers. De Beers Forevermark, second brand, more masstige. I took on the responsibility to run this brand in addition to De Beers Jewelers for a couple of years while the brand was in transition. And then I handed it over back to another CEO about a year ago to fully focus on De Beers London. And here I am.
Here you are. What's it like the first day of taking a CEO role? Do you sort of sit down at your desk and think, what do I do actually every day? Did you have a very clear sense of how you slide into that role and assume the responsibilities, or what was the learning curve like?
And I never asked myself the question. You mean it's like running any other business? Well, you're in charge, so you do need. Well, first of all, you listen to your team, so you spend quite a bit of time with your team. And for me, the learning curve was really on the managing the value back to the shareholders and managing the finances of the financing of the company. I knew the company was in trouble when I took it over. We were not profitable. We had to self-finance for a while, and I faced I think a level of financial literacy or lack thereof where I really had to pivot and learn quickly. So I spent an incredible amount of time with the CFO of the company, who had been there for, I think, a little bit over a year. Spent quite a bit of time with the the representative of the shareholder to really understand, because when you're producing, well, one, you have to make payroll, obviously. You need to pay rent. We had stores all over the world. You produce stock, your jewelry pieces that are quite expensive. So there's an entire ecosystem that, it rests on not really on your shoulders. It sounds pompous to say that, but, you're responsible for a lot of people and a lot of families.
It's quite stressful.
It's quite stressful. And you know that the company is not doing well. And you also know that your peers in the industry are kind of watching and they're like, geez, she took a big one. That piece might be bigger than she can chew. So you feel pressure. You wonder if you're really ready for this. And in the end, 1 week in, you know what to do fairly quickly. I mean, I knew what to do fairly quickly, but you're fully in, fully. There's no, I'll ease in quick, I'll ease in into this job. It's like it was.
When was the moment what was it like when you knew that the business was going bankrupt?
Oh, well.
And the implication on you actually, and what you'd have to, the human implication.
It was after, after a year in the job, I was pretty pleased because we had survived a year of self-financing, which for a jewelry business is not easy because managing cash flow was fairly new to me. When you're part of big groups, you don't have to worry about that. The group worries about that and how much money you need on a monthly basis. So I was really pleased with what we had managed to do. The board, with my support and the support of my team, had secured a new investor. So, we're like, okay, we're safe, and I felt safe and my team was safe, which I was really pleased about because everybody stuck with me.
Yeah.
The jewelers at their desk, I was transparent with them, I think as much as I could be. And they knew it was going to be a difficult road out of the situation we were in, but we all believed. And then suddenly, first, I think the week right after Christmas, we had really bad press. The old shareholder had really bad press. They were fighting through lawyers and in the press. And the new investor pulled the plug and said, "I'm not getting involved in this." Why am I buying the company? Because they were buying an asset.
Yeah.
If the current shareholders are destroying it, right?
Yeah.
What am I doing here? And so then it's like, okay, what am I doing? So I had conversation with the local authorities because I was trying to get prepared. What if, right? How does this work? I've never done it before. And I'm going to have to do it in different countries, Switzerland, UK, Italy, the States. How does this, it was quite overwhelming. But then, so it was painful, but there's a process. And the CFO, again, incredible guy, the head of HR, we spent a lot of time together to figure this out. So went to the authorities, made sure our teams were taken care of and had access to unemployment, which is very generous in Switzerland and in France. It was not the case in the UK, but there's a playbook to do this, and you're accompanied by lawyers, and so it's hard because you don't have, as a CEO, you don't really have time to, and it's a choice, and not everybody stays through this, but you don't really have time to mourn your project, because there's two things. There's getting through the process and making sure that also your personal liability is limited, right?
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a whole creative world that, goes away, that dream that you had.
Yeah.
For yourself, for your team, all these things that you wanted to achieve as a collective, this is all going away. It's quite brutal.
What advice would you give to someone facing the very real possibility of bankruptcy? I don't think anyone talks about this.
Be prepared. I mean, we started exploring the what ifs with the CFO throughout our time together in the company, because when you're close to not being able to making payroll, there are warning signs. You know when you start to run out of money, and this is when you need to also you need to be very careful as to what you can do and cannot do, right, with shareholder money and managing debt and all of that. So I knew nothing about this before I joined that company in Switzerland, and it's a good reminder that being CEO is not just about sharing wisdom on podcasts and doing interviews, and the spotlight is also quite cruel when it comes to facing difficulties, and it's a serious responsibility to run a company.
It's incredibly stressful in bad moments.
Yes.
How did that shape what you then sought from your next role?
I really wanted financial stability. It's like, I'm not going back. So I was raised by a small entrepreneur. My dad was an entrepreneur, and I've always had that in me. That my grandmother was running a business. She handed it over to my dad, and I've always had that in me, that I would like to have my own project, which in the luxury industry is, I mean, unless you inherit something, it's rare that you start from something from scratch, right? So De Grisogono was the closest to an entrepreneurial project as I've ever had. And I needed a break from that because it took a piece of my soul with it. I don't want to sound too dramatic, but I was really sad, really sad. Okay. And so, that was important, and to me, this financial stability of the shareholder for the next project. And then I tried to recreate a similar environment for my team, because I had tasted, in a way, what the power of the collective and the power of belief and cultivating that belief within an organization. I had tasted what that can deliver and how much you can overcome as a team, as a leadership team. And I was determined to creating that same environment at De Beers when I joined.
And what was it like joining De Beers, and what was the change that you felt proudest of making during your tenure?
So, when you say, I was telling you earlier, you get, I know my decisions. I tend to know when my decisions are the good ones, because I get pushback on them. Therefore, I have to think twice or three times and really articulate the reasons as to the reasons why this is the best course of action. When I joined, the product portfolio of the brand was really geared towards non-distinctive jewelry creation, so studs, tennis bracelets, which you can find, in any jewelry store. And the only unique, the USP for those pieces was only the beauty of the diamonds, which is important, right? The beauty of the material you use, but not having a style, a clearly defined style for a jewelry house is a danger. When you want to build and grow the company. And so when I joined, I sat down with the CEO of the group, Bruce Cleaver at the time, and said, and Stephen Lucier, who was the chairman of De Beers Jewelers, and said, we really need to pivot the product offer. We need to get out of bridal. We need to get out of anything that's commoditized and can be found in any other jewelry house, and we need to go all in the design-led portfolio. And it means taking risks, because there's no study, there's no focus groups when you do jewelry.
You got to build the category.
You build the category,
which they did in 1938. They invented the market for the engagement ring.
Yeah, but that the engagement ring can be the same engagement ring. Roughly, can be presented in all the stores on Bond Street. It's
Yeah, exactly.
But
now
so what's going to make De Beers Jewelers, De Beers London now different, and shifting a product portfolio in any business, whether it's fashion or leather goods or sportswear or jewelry, it's quite a bet because you have stock, you have an image that's built around your portfolio. You have a certain kind of clientele, right? That's coming to you for a certain kind of thing. I knew this was not going to be the future for the jewelry house. And so we embarked on that pivot, starting at the top with high jewelry and exceptional creations, and really beefing up creativity within the skills and the knowledge within the team, but two, how far we were willing to go with our creations, both on design but also on the craftsmanship side. And we achieved it. It took 4 years to really pivot the share of business on the delivered by design led and for that piece of the business to really take over from commoditized, what we call internally commoditized non-design led jewelry creations. And that's a big achievement. It's almost like starting a brand from scratch.
What was the hardest thing about it?
Convincing internally. So the creating internally, not within the team, because within my team, people came from the luxury industry, came from jewelry, and understood that, okay, this is how it's built, at the competition. So there was no questioning. But the environment that was around De Beers Jewelers was a B2B environment, right?
Yeah, exactly.
And
what was the ratio, B2B, B2C?
A few. We used to joke that De Beers Jewelers was a rounding error in the in the overall P&L of the De Beers Group. So and again, it was not to say that the beauty of the diamond was not a key element in what makes De Beers Jewelers, De Beers London different and better than the competition, but it's not the only thing. It can't be the only thing.
Well, especially, I guess, to this backdrop of lab grown and like all sorts of other forms of, things that are being positioned as being desirable in different ways that play to different sort of cultural trends that exist as well, which presumably was pretty challenging to navigate because you're investing in keeping categories head above water in some ways.
Yes.
Perhaps. I don't know. So without going too much into De Beers,
yes.
You spoke earlier about trying not to inhabit different personas, right? We're the same person at home that we are at work, but we're always outsiders in one way or another to the kind of domain in which we exist. I think these days it's very easy to be the same person, at home as you are at work. But I think it was quite different like 20 years ago, 30 years ago. And I think what I've noticed as well about the French organizations that we work with is they tend to be more hierarchical as well. I've noticed that there's a stronger sense of hierarchy with all of our clients who are headquartered in Paris. And then that's sort of compounded by the fact that you don't necessarily come from your typical luxury background. So how did you balance, sort of the home life and being the sole caregiver for your daughter, having very high-powered roles that are incredibly demanding, leading a business through bankruptcy, a large organization through bankruptcy is no joke, while also crafting a path in the world of luxury, which has challenges?
What I was told was, you make a really great point about French culture, French business culture. And there's a reason why I, quote unquote, fled to America. Because, I'm not very hierarchical. I don't respond well to authority just because someone has a bigger title than me. It takes more to command my respect and my loyalty and get my loyalty. And I expect more from them than just, being my boss. It's not enough. And I've been like that from the beginning. I'm not the easiest person to manage because while I'm very loyal, and I can climb mountains if you ask me to. You still need to demonstrate to me that you're my boss, not just because, I report to you in the system at the office.
Yeah,
right?
there's a mutual respect.
There's respect, there's trust, and I do better in authentic environments. So I moved to the States and really leaned into this strength of mine, which was to create fellowship in a way. And I've worked at Vuitton. It was a really great school because I worked in a matrix environment where I had a big number of people working with me, not really directly for me, but my performance was directly linked to how well they were doing pushing the category, watches and jewelry, in a network of stores that where 99% of the margin was delivered by other categories, right? So I had a small share of voice, yet I had to encourage store directors and sales associates in the stores to really putting more effort into a category that's not easy to sell, like watches and jewelry. So I've realized that I'm good at this. I'm good at embarking people, and at creating fellowship, and this is really how I lead best. And this was called soft skills by French recruiters, and like typical French corporate environment back in those days, because they thought that you just have to flex your authority to make this happen. It doesn't work like that. People have to have the choice to work in an organization or another. They have the choice to really give you 50% of what they can, 20% of what they can, or 200% of what they have within. They can give you 200% of what they have within and deliver above expectations. And that range is a function of trust and how authentic they are and you are with them in driving the business.
I think what's interesting that stands out to me from what you said is that, too often empathy isn't quantified as part of the sort of like hiring equation for leadership. And leadership is really about making a persuasive case for people to change course and like to work in the same direction and to sort of effectively, you spoke about the transformation that De Beers went through, that you led over 4 years, the organization through. The biggest resistance to change is when people feel like their voice is not heard in that process of change. Mm-hmm. I mean, we're an organization who lead like many transformations, and the thing I've learned is go and interview the mechanic, go and interview the cleaner, go and interview the person who stands behind reception, go and interview all of these people who, like, when they're all working in the same direction, they feel like their voice and ideas have been heard, create this sort of compounding flywheel of energy. And if you make them, and actually you find the best insights from them, because often the people in the boardroom are, especially with the case of our clients who are in luxury, or maybe high net worth themselves, maybe they become starry-eyed about something that's inspired them in their personal life, and they try and bring that into, the direction of their work, the direction they provide in their working life to their business. And actually the truth of the customer exists with those on the front line, and they tend to be the people evangelizing what that brand stands for and how it operates. And if you involve them, and sometimes like build a bit of a Trojan horse that allows you to like make that change effective, then it's really, it gets overlooked, right?
You make a great point. So I joined, took the role in September 2020, lockdown. I was really worried about not being able to build that bond that we talked about with the teams. How am I going to get those insights? And I really need to connect. This is really important for me to connect as a human to the people that I work with. And so I've set up virtual coffees with all employees in the organization. At the time it was 450 employees.
Individually?
So I couldn't do individually for all because a big portion of my team in China doesn't speak English.
Okay.
So we had to do it at store level in some cases where the store manager speaks English and was translating for the associates in the store, but everybody else got a one-to-one, 15, 20 minutes. Sometimes we had to schedule 2 back-to-back because there was so much into those conversations. So I told you the big piece on my agenda was to elevate the perception of De Beers jewelers in the high jewelry world and really quickly become a force to be reckoned with, creative force, but also a force respected for craftsmanship. And it's hard because you're measuring yourself against brands that are Place Vendôme, who have been doing this in their French ateliers for centuries, and who are, in some cases, adding, innovation and new designs to designs that have been sitting in archives for 100 years. So very rich environment, very tenured teams. And here I was, this is what we're going to do together as a team. And I had no team.
Yeah.
I joined, and it's hard to recruit people when you're in the middle of COVID. So anyway, one of the conversation that I had was with this young colleague who told me that her background was doing maquettes for a high jeweler back in Italy. And maquette, you sometimes they're made out of paper, sometimes they're made out of wax, pâte à modeler. I don't know, that thing that your kids are using probably at the moment. They're building things. And okay, so you craft the volumes of a piece of jewelry and you kind of test if it works before the CAD, before you go into the computer to vet your vision for the pieces. And she was, I don't know, managing some Excel spreadsheet somewhere in the QC, in the quality control team. I'm like, what are you doing in that team? Gotta move you. Okay, so I'm going to be building a product development team. I want someone focused on high jewelry, and you're going to be doing this. Do you want to do this? And she was super excited. And so anyway, those conversations, which I would have had naturally at the coffee machine, I pop in a lot in my team's offices, or I spend time at the coffee machine. I just love chatting about the passions and the interests of the colleagues in my teams outside of work, because it also often informs what they're naturally interested in doing and therefore passionate about and therefore better at. And so that movement it sounds like something, okay, well, she found a better use for someone in her team. That's great. But no, it really unlocked a full organizational change. And 2, it unlocked value for the brand.
Yeah.
Tremendous value.
I mean, there's something that you mentioned that really interests me, actually, which is your responsibility as a CEO to manage the org design. And, a challenge that we see time and time again is obviously customer experience moves through departments. Departments are set up as verticals that tend to be quite siloed, but everyone together is responsible for how a client or a customer moves, through different aspects of what the product delivers. I would imagine in a B2B business, or a business that's perhaps inherited a sense of org structure from its B2B, parent, the challenges around org design maybe can be quite tough. How did you think about how you structured your organization and change things where necessary?
It's interesting that you talk about customer service, because when I joined, there was no commercial leadership or client leadership within the organization. It was a very unusual leadership team that had been assembled to lead the business. So I didn't really reinvent the wheel. I focused on, for me, the key steps towards transforming the business. So I took on the product directly and figured, okay, it's going to be the fastest and the easiest way if I manage that bit, the product, the portfolio, and the creative vision, and I know exactly what to do. And then I'll put the resources of the company, because again, you have to be fiscally responsible. I couldn't do everything at the same time, bringing in all those senior leaders and allocating significant budgets to each of them. So I've really focused on the commercial bit, and I brought in a really tenured chief commercial officer, gave him product, gave him BVM, and significant budgets for him to be elevating the client experience from how people are greeted in the store. And that goes with training, how we're training the teams to host, to talk about the product. We worked on a new store concept, which will be unveiled in Paris at the end of this year. New VM concept, visual merchandising, and how you experience the product physically, visually is really important. That's where I started my career at Cartier. I was managing visual merchandising. I was part of that team for the French market. And that's, luxury for me is about the dream, and it's about, there's a bit of magic, and how you present visually the product is really critical. That's the first experience. That's the first sparkle in the eye of a potential client, right? You create desire that way.
What is it that interests you about luxury? When did it all start?
So there's luxury and there's jewelry. So it's my experience of luxury started with jewelry,
okay,
and then expanded from that, because there's a lot of adjacent or connected qualities to between the different product categories. But it started with jewelry because I love beautiful objects. I love objects that tell a story. And I don't think there's any other category of product that, carries beauty, carries intrinsic value, emotional value, is linked to transmission between people who live and but also, your ancestry.
Mm-hmm.
Is a perfect combination of, when you think also of how those products, those objects come to life. It starts with a sketch, moves on to a wax, or the creativity of someone who's going to use their hands to interpret a design. Then you move to a jeweler. There's a gem setter along the way who's going to pick colors and support that first vision from the designer, right? To add to it, contribute to it, and then manufacturing. I don't think there's any other example of collective work for a piece that's going to be as intimate, because it's on your body, as a piece of jewelry. So I'm trying to rationalize why, you can't always explain why you're attracted to something or an object. But looking back now with the wisdom of 25 years, I think that's it. There's the element of storytelling, which is important, and that's linked to transmission, etc. And the moment that you receive that piece of jewelry or you bought it for yourself, and then all the different steps that transformed a thought into a design, into a piece of jewelry, and all those hands that collaborated to it. To me, that's really inspiring.
It's funny, isn't it? It's like, basically, as a human race, we value the aggregate of blood, sweat, and tears. We care about effort, and the soul of a thing as a result of that effort that's been invested in anything, in like a decision, in an object, the beauty of it, the symbolism of it, and well, I guess that's what drives the meaning of it, and hence the symbolism of the thing. And I think we're at a very interesting crossroads where we can synthesize beauty quite quickly. We can use AI, or we can mechanize creativity. And I think that will only enhance actually the value of the human made, of the handmade, of the things that are born of years of skill honed, and that aren't just automated or made to have an aesthetic that doesn't actually have beneath it the substance or like the soul, So really what excites me.
And the time invested in it.
Exactly.
It's not immediate.
Exactly.
And you change that design, you evolve that design along the way. Also, it's often the case that that first sketch, that first design intention, it gives the direction of travel. It gives the energy of the piece, but the final item has evolved, and it's richer because of that. So it's really a human enterprise to be doing a piece of jewelry, and it doesn't matter if it's in gold, if it's in wood, the material is irrelevant in many ways.
De Beers sort of invented the ritual around engagement, and created a commercial enterprise around, 3 months of salary for the person you love. And we're now in a world which is more secular, more gender fluid, very different in many ways, let's say. How did De Beers, or how do you think the sector rather actually, should think about everything from materials and how they relate to sustainability through to ritual and what it means to celebrate different types of moment that aren't necessarily born of, like the church, for example?
I think marketing in 1947, when that concept was created, like really took.
So I got my dates wrong.
I think it's 1947. So the diamond is forever, and marketing today, with social media, with the world we live in, this has really, really evolved, and there's a lot of trends are now grassroots. They're coming from. It's no longer adoption, right? The brands are adopting trends that are created somewhere by an influencer or somewhere because someone had a clever idea. So the dynamics have changed. How you keep a product or a category relevant today is really complex. The marketing budgets you would need to get the same firepower that you did in the 40s.
Yeah.
It's insane. It's just not possible. So you have to do it differently. I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I'm curious to see how it's going to get done.
I think it's hard for large organizations. I think if you stand for one thing that's quite singular, you can double down on that. And it's easier to get sort of sustainable cut through. I think the problem for larger organizations who've diversified and are quite global and are trying perhaps to appease, a customer base that I think has become more niche and segmented, is just dilution of message. And I think it's very, very difficult to feed the flywheel when you have a diluted message. I think that's the problem with most. They become the business of luxury. They don't become the craft of it. They're not driven by the passion, enthusiasm, spirit, soul that ultimately led to developing an innovative and scarce product to begin with. They become status symbols, and they become a business, and they become kind of manufactured, right? So I think that's very difficult challenge.
True. And as a brand, you fight the wrong battles.
Quite.
There's a very amusing battle at the moment. If you look around, everybody's fighting for love. Everybody wants to own love, but love is not one-dimensional today. It's complex. It's not just a commitment between two people. There's much more. It's richer than that. It's more complex than that. And so it makes, I think, the job of a marketer and the job of a brand builder even more complicated. But at the same time, it provides lots of opportunities. If love can be many things, then don't boil it down to just one concept or one thing between two people.
I hadn't really been keeping my finger on that pulse, actually. I didn't know that was a theme that people were playing with redefining right now. And it's funny because we've undermined the mundaneness of love, or like that. Yeah, we have so many pyrotechnics everywhere. Do you know what I mean? In life, there's so much headline driven, captivating like concepts of like love and excitement and passion and lust, that you forget actually that like love is sort of like the sort of everyday equanimity almost, you know? It's
Yeah,
like a sort of
and love, you know, there's that famous Harvard study, which, you know, on LinkedIn is being pulled out of the boxes
yeah.
on a quarterly basis, that tells us that, you know, love and connections are in the end what people value most and what drives happiness. So, you know, there's a lot to build on that for in particular for the jewelry industry, I think.
You know, the most technologically advanced nations in the world have the greatest epidemics of loneliness, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, in the US, you know, I did a talk recently and I got really deep into the rabbit hole on these studies of loneliness. And in the US, people under the age of 30 are lonelier than people over the age of 70, you know, which is a problem in society if that's the case. You know, 1 in 3 people 15 years ago had someone they would be able to immediately class as their best friend or someone very close to them. And now it's only 1 in 15 people,
Mm-hmm.
which is crazy. Only 1 in 15 people have a best friend under the age of 30. I mean, this is the age where you spend your life with your friends,
Mm-hmm.
which is, you know, it would strike me that there's an inverse relationship then between what we deem as progress, technological progress and happiness. And, you know, I think hopefully the paradigm of what happiness is will shift at some point and we'll look and realize that progress wasn't really progress. It was just the wrong measurement.
It's like in everything. I see it in my 14-year-old. She really, what she was really excited about social media and being virtually connected and all of that. She's now reverting to really valuing her in-person meet with her friends, and she's also, you know, she refuses to read. This is different but connected, I think. She refuses to read books on a tablet. So I think the physical element of life and connecting to objects and people physically, that lack of physical connectivity in teenagers today, they're really trying to compensate for that. I think in the best they can by physical meet with their friends and again connecting with physical objects. I find that quite interesting because there was a while where she was interested in playing with her friends on those apps where they were no, not apps but Roblox, etc.
Yeah.
Where she knew she was playing with her best friend, but her best friend was at her home, and she's out of that completely now. It's all about
That's interesting.
being in person.
What do you do to switch off?
I cook. I cook and I listen to this. I cook and I double task. I listen to podcasts.
What's your favorite podcast?
Acquired.
I'll look it up.
It's really good. Really good.
Okay. I also love cooking. I've got a dinner party this evening. I'll listen to it while I cook and think of you listening to a podcast.
Good.
Can we talk briefly about challenges around being in a high-powered role as a mother,
Mm-hmm.
as a single mother?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think that we like to pretend that it's the same for men and women, and it's just not. It's just incredibly difficult, I think. Or maybe it is, I don't know. But it would strike me, especially in those early years, as being unbelievably challenging. The working world is not designed to accommodate also, easily being a mother to your children. It's very, very difficult. And, what I'm interested in is how you balanced things and also the positive changes that you've seen through your working career in the world today versus, the world in which you are raising your daughter.
Mm-hmm. So there's no such thing as balance. You alternate in my case, and trying to be really honest about this because it doesn't suit everybody, but I alternate between being a great mom and a great CEO. It's impossible to do both. And it's really hard to be present in both those important roles. And my most important role is to be a mom. It's really hard to be present when you're trying to do two things at the same time. So it's really being successful at it, having those two hats is really about managing the imbalance, in my view. And it's not for everybody.
Yeah.
Because you will experience moments of sadness where you think you're failing as a mom because you've missed something, because I did miss some stuff, or you've had to make choices, and you missed out on things at work, right? But
Yeah.
that's, you can't be perfect. And I think overcoming this idea that you will be the perfect mom or the perfect CEO or the perfect dad for that matter, because single parents, it's, there's also a lot of single men, single dad, raising kids, or very involved dads also. And I see it in my team, that commercial director that CCO that I mentioned earlier. His first request when I extended the offer to him was, he said, well, my wife is pregnant with our second one. I really want to be there for the birth. I want to spend time. I want to bond with my second child. So is it okay with you? And I said, sure. So he took a few months off. After he joined 2 weeks, and then took a few months off to be with his family and his wife. And as, again, the person in charge, being able to make those decisions, it was important to me to model model this new way of this way of managing. That if his desire is to spend time with his family and be present for his kids, then we'll make it work, and he's going to be a better leader. He's going to be a better example for his team, not just men but also women, in his extended team in markets and in London. And he's very present for his kids. So I think having more women in the decision at the decision table is shaping. I think we're able to model an example for women, but most importantly, in a way, the more I reflect on it, we're also allowing men to be dads, and to take their share of joy at home, and to have this opportunity to not just be a provider to the family, but to really be involved in raising their kids. And there's a lot of example in the organization, at De Beers, where I see really committed and involved parents, male and female, and both need to be supported.
I think everyone's got their own narrative they craft, and that narrative is always sort of based on what they want to do in the short term versus what they believe is correct in the long term. And every parent who works hard does it for one would hope on the whole for their own enjoyment, but also for the benefit of the life they're designing for their family. And so it's like so easy to generalize, isn't it? But every decision you make, you tend to figure out what that trade-off is, and it's very personal, and some people come from backgrounds, I suppose, that are more stable or secure, and others like less so. Do you know what I mean? And it's just very interesting. So much of this stuff gets so generalized when it's spoken about, but it's just a deeply personal balance that we all have to, try and find harmony in.
Harmony is a beautiful word. I think it's chasing harmony in your life.
Chasing harmony
is what we all hope will lead to experiencing harmony in our lives.
Chasing harmony. There's a funny contrast in that. I always talk about my aggressive approach to meditation. It's got the same ridiculous sort of competitive approach to chasing harmony.
Chasing for me is a verb that I could apply to many facets of how I lead my life. I chase people, things, dreams. I chase positive energy also. I really, I look for it. And I like that verb.
So Celine, we always ask our guests the same 4 outro questions. The first is, what would you change about your industry? If you could change one thing, what would you change?
A more progressive approach on diversity and inclusion. Okay. I think we're too Paris-centered. Very few female leaders, but also very few diverse leaders. And that doesn't reflect the client base, which is very, very diverse. Wealth today is more diverse than it was. And I think we're going to miss the boat creatively, first of all, because if the ideas, the concept, the innovation is coming from minds that were shaped in the same schools, in the same countries, in the same cities, and who come from the same backgrounds, we're going to run out of creativity and exciting things.
Isn't it so important when the entire industry is predicated on providing people with symbols, like emotional symbols of things, and everyone's emotional gamut is so different, right, based on their context. And if it's all coming from the same minds, brought up in the same schools, as you said, then you miss a massive commercial opportunity, actually, which is such a shame.
Yeah, it's bad business.
Yeah, it's bad business. What most concerns you about the world that we're all leaving our kids?
The lack of physical connection and the lack of understanding of the power of time on ideas, on maturing an idea, and on creating something, building a business, creating an object. I think there's too much immediacy and instantaneity. I'm not sure that's an English word. It's a French word.
Yeah, I get it.
Too fast. And time means energy, means resilience, means putting energy into something. And I don't think there's quite an understanding of what it takes to do things in the younger generations. They're too spoiled.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's hard, though, to not think that and then just wonder if it's just like a product of becoming quite middle-aged. And I'm like, always like have a little bit of a meltdown about
It's totally our fault too. It's the way we are, But yes, I think the world has evolved faster than our ability and our ability to parent.
Yeah.
I don't think we have adjusted, in a way, parenting a bit like my parents parented me. And I think we need, with the world evolving so fast around us, it's probably a better way to do it with our kids.
Yeah, I think you're right on just this expectation that we can shortcut a process and still achieve the emotional kickback, the positive emotional kickback. It's like without conflict or tension, there is no satisfaction and joy. There's no sense of achievement, and without that, there is no like concept of progress. And so we can't short circuit that, because otherwise we short circuit meaning.
So one of the entrepreneurs that I find really inspiring today is Sarah Blakely from Spanx. And she says that the conversation at the dinner table with her family every night was about sharing with her dad in particular, the things that she had failed at on that day. The value of failure, the value of not succeeding at something is underrated today, because failing leads to success, because you need to try multiple things multiple times before succeeding. And I think the immediacy and the emptiness of the comes in contrast with that culture of trying and failing and not being good at things.
Yeah.
And I think it's a point of focus. We should have it as a point of focus when we raise our kids.
For sure. My next question is a sort of funny one, given the fact you've just left your job, and it is actually, if you had to give up your job tomorrow, what would you do?
I would. So if I had to leave the corporate world, let's say, I had to leave the corporate world, I would go and breed horses.
Okay.
That's what I would do. I would totally move to Normandy and I don't know.
A dirt bike in it. We didn't touch on your petrol head, on the fact that you love cars and motorbikes.
Yeah, and collect vintage cars. Here we go.
Yeah,
or motorbikes. There's a whole side of me which is not linked to our beautiful industry, which I cultivate at times. It's hard because there's only 24 hours in a day, but makes me who I am, I guess.
What is the most So I was going to make a bit of a joke actually about the fact, one of the great things about it being you and your daughter is that you can both get into a two-seater sports car and have a really nice afternoon without having to worry about seats 3 and 4.
Yeah. Well, I did so last year I treated myself to it's not a true two-seater, but I treated myself to a sports car, a vintage one.
Which one?
Vintage, not that one, a 997.
Okay,
And I
nice.
love it. And
Yeah.
Chris loves it. We call our car Barbie. And Barbie is high maintenance. Barbie always has something going wrong with her. But yeah, there's a lot of pleasure with driving around London with Chloe next to me. And
amazing. Celine, thank you so much.
My pleasure.
It's been really inspirational to listen to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for this opportunity.